Welcome to Difference Talks, the show that focuses on one word, differentiation, and how it is more important today than ever to discover what makes your brand unique and celebrate it with the most important people, your team.
In each episode, we meet people who've had the courage to stand up and stand out, sometimes against great odds. In a world of copies, conformity, and commodities, uniqueness speaks volumes. Difference Talks.
Hello, everybody. I am Barry LeBove. I am the founder and president of LeBove Marketing, Communication, and Training, and I am the author of The Power of Differentiation. Today, I have a really great guest. He's an old friend of mine. He's a pretty brilliant person, so I'll just give you a little background on him. He's somewhat humble for somebody that's done all the amazing things that he's done, but he started a little company. He was, when I met him back in 78 or 79, he was a service person for Hobart, and he would drive around and fix, I got him going there. Didn't think that was going to happen. He was a service guy for Hobart, fixing equipment at restaurants, and he had his own home recording studios, and I believe, didn't you have 2 golden retrievers, Chuck, that were running around?
Right. Yep.
So we'd be recording. My band would be recording at his place, and the dogs are running around and everything. And Chuck was the engineer. He's a really accomplished musician as well, saxophonist, keyboardist. And my band would record there, and that's how we met. And to give you a precursor, one day I'm in there with him, and we're recording a song. He goes, "Hold on, everybody. We got to stop." I go, "Why?" He goes, "I got a phone call." I go, "Well, come on, Chuck. We're writing this song here. We're trying to make it sound great. I mean, come on, Chuck." He goes, "No, hold on." So he's on the phone and he goes, "Okay. All right, Stevie, I'll get back to you." I said, "Well, who's Stevie?" He goes, "Stevie Wonder." So I went, "Okay. There's something going on with what Chuck's doing," because he was really getting involved in music, getting involved with patches for keyboards and things like that. So what's happened with Chuck that's been astounding is he founded Sweetwater Sound. It is today the largest retailer of musical equipment worldwide. We're going to get into that because I think there's some really interesting approaches he's taken to the experience of Sweetwater, which is astounding. In addition to that, he's now stepped from that role and is really very philanthropically involved in our region. So we'll talk about that as well. So, Chuck, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Barry. I'm happy to be here. And thanks for the kind introduction.
It's a kind one, but it is true. So I think it's great. Chuck, can you tell us a little bit about how in the world a guy that was a Boy Scout, I think you went to Wayne High School here in the area, I think it was Wayne, and you're the Hobart guy. I think your dad was Mr. Bug, the exterminator, and your mom was Mrs. Bug or something like that. And that's your background. And all of a sudden, overnight, meaning a few decades, you grow this business. How did you get to that point? Share a little bit of the story if you could.
Sure. Overnight, you know how that works.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I did go to Wayne High School, but I'll tell you the thing that probably set me up for life more than anything was Boy Scouts. You know, Boy Scouts aren't maybe as popular today as they were when we were kids, but a Boy Scout learns to be trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, clean, brave, and reverent. For me, they are amazing principles to live by personally, and they're also amazing to run your businesses by. And that's how I've done my businesses for the last 45 years or so. And I don't expect all of my employees to memorize the Scout Law, but you can always Google it and find it. And they're just great everyday principles. And that's how I run the business. And I just always want to do the right thing, treat people the way I'd want to be treated. Kind of really simple stuff, but really executing every day on every one of those details. You know, how the business started, I was on the road as a musician after high school. I play saxophone and keyboards, as you mentioned. I traveled all over the country. I did about 40 states out of the 50 at the time. And back in those days, you could play music 6 nights a week at the local Holiday Inn or the nightclubs or restaurants. And then on Sunday, you'd travel to the next one. And so I played quite a bit. But living out of suitcases and on the road is not necessarily a great life. And I knew I wasn't a good enough musician to really make it in the big time. And But I also loved technology, and I learned how to work the technology on the road. Back in those early days, there weren't really very many recording studios. A lot of the recordings happened in the radio stations. And so we would travel from town to town, and we get there on Sunday or Monday morning, and we'd go to the local radio station and make a commercial about our band being at that restaurant or that hotel for the week. And so I was always the guy in the band that would work the equipment. And on stage, being a saxophone player, I'd play it with one hand and run the mixer with my other hand. And so I really learned how to use the equipment. And what I loved was, when I started recording, was making musicians sound better than maybe they were sometimes. And I don't mean that you and your band, but some of the other
Of course
artists
not.
that I spent time with, it was fun actually producing them. And that's the part that I really loved, is helping people sound better than they were. Anyway, after being on the road for several years, I came home, and I didn't have much except this beat up old VW bus that my mom and dad had given me in high school, and a little bit of recording equipment that I'd picked up on the road. And so I came back and decided to start a mobile recording studio because I didn't know any better. And I would pull the bus alongside the school or the church or the nightclub. I'd run 100 feet of microphone cables in and mic up the band or the choir or the preacher or the company president, whatever it was. And then I'd sit in my VW bus with headphones and record on, in those days, reel-to-reel tape recorder. And once the recordings were all done, I would take them back to my very modest 12 by 55 mobile home, where I would edit the songs in the right order, put a little reverb and compression on them. And then we'd send away and make albums or 45s back in those days, and eventually cassettes and CDs. But that's really the genesis of the company. And then after doing that for a couple of years, I found a location on Getz Road, or the west side of Fort Wayne. Small 1,000 square foot house. I built a real 1.5 car garage recording studio, and that's where we started doing a lot of work together. And now I could go out on location with the VW bus, or I could have people come to my location. And that's what really started the business. And for several years, I did lots of advertising, lots of bands, all kinds of things like that. What really changed the business, though, in 1984, I had a friend that invited me to the NAMM show. And I said, "What the heck is the NAMM show?" And he says, "It's the National Association of Music Merchants." And it was a music dealer show in Chicago. And I said, "Well, I'll go with you." He owned the local piano and organ store. And so I went and I saw a prototype of the Kurzweil K250. It was the first music instrument that played back digital recordings of other instruments. Up until then, we had synthesizers, we had organs, we had electric pianos, but this actually would play back a recording of a 9-foot grand piano or a 50-voice choir or a 45-piece string section. And it's a long story, but the instrument was actually invented by Ray Kurzweil and some of his engineer friends from MIT, and it was done on a dare or on a request from Stevie Wonder. And Stevie wanted an instrument that could play back all the sounds of the orchestra. And Ray said, "I don't see any problem with that. I'll just record them and store them." You have to understand, that was in 1983 and 84, when computer memory was really expensive. Today we can sample and record on our ballpoint pens and our iPads and iPhones, but you couldn't do that in the mid-80s. But it was a revolutionary instrument. It had a full 88 keys, like a grand piano, but it could sound like anything you wanted. And you could record your own sounds into it. So I thought, well, this is amazing. If I had one of these in my recording studio, I could offer my customers a little extra, or what we call lanyap from down south. So at the end of every recording session, I could say to my friends, my customers, "Would you like to hear your music with a big string section or with an upright bass or something like that?" And it allowed me to get a couple more hours of studio time on every session. It allowed my customers to get a better sounding product. And I started reverse engineering how it worked, started making my own sounds. I started writing new software for the machine. And that's how I became friends with Stevie Wonder and Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton and Bob James and Lyle Mays and all these old artists. And it was an amazing story. And I started selling them instruments. And, they had their first one, but they needed a second one or a third one. It got to the point where Kenny Rogers had 14 of these Kurzweil K250s on the road, because he was duplicating at that time 30 years of his hits. And he'd have about 8 of them on stage, 2 for each of his 4 keyboard players, a couple of them in the green room and on the bus and all that. And one day I got a call from one of my friends, and he wanted to know if I could do sheet music on the computer. And I said, "Well, I know how to do that. I'm already doing that in my studio." And so I became a dealer for software on the Macintosh computer back in those days, and then the interfaces. And the company changed from being just a recording studio to a retail business. And I was helping my friends all over the country. And I literally, one by one, helping my friends all over the country. Fast forward to today, and we sell about 80,000 different products. We have 2,800 employees, and we're the largest in the world, as you said, at selling music instruments online. It's pretty an amazing story.
It is amazing. You know, one thing you brought up that I kind of want to go back to
Sure.
is when you produce somebody, because I know this, I used to do production too. And you and I produced together, and I produced on my own with other people. I found that sometimes, and I'd like your feedback on this, Chuck, but I found that sometimes I was more tired and exhausted after producing somebody than they were. I mean, I felt like I had to work as hard or harder to have them sound even better than they were. What's your experience on that as a
Oh,
producer?
that is so true. I mean, most of the time, if you're really producing them, depending what level the artists are, they're not that good. And so you're listening to intonation, you're listening to wrong notes and all that sort of. They don't even know they're playing wrong notes, but it's causing us to cringe in the control room, or maybe we just see ideas that they wouldn't necessarily think of and find ways again to make them sound better. So
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think what's interesting is that it really connects to business too, because a lot of times you feel so exhausted trying to get something done and you're going, oh my gosh, I'm trying to get people together to do this and all this. I found it really relates to business because you can be exhausted as the leader of something that you're working on, some project or initiative. And yet the people around you are kind of going, well, why are you so beat up and tired? I mean, come on, that's crazy. And I'm going, yeah, but we're trying to do this thing great. And it really translates from the music world to the business world.
totally. I'll tell you the other thing that really translates also for me are the details. When you're a producer, you're an engineer, you're listening for details of maybe multiple musicians in the room and you're orchestrating, if you will, all of them. That's absolutely what you do in business every day. You're looking for fine details and you're never satisfied with good enough. You're always trying to make it the best it can be.
Yeah, I agree with you. Now, a personal question, because I'm going to ask you a couple of business related ones in a moment. Then I'm going to close with a couple of personal ones. Hopefully, a few that you have not had asked to you, or certainly not often. Um, of all the things, because you've done a lot of interviews, Chuck, and you've known a lot of people, what is a surprising thing that even a guy who's known you for 40 years might go, I had no idea? Give me
Hmm.
something. Give me something that's a little different about you that the audience would go, huh, I had no idea.
I would say one of them, and you may know this, but I'm pretty darn shy. Uh,
Hmm.
I'll walk in the room and I'm in the corner, even though I've been very successful and had, just lots of fun times, but I'm the guy that tends to be quiet and in the corner of the room.
Yep. Yep. And I am too. A lot of people think, oh, you're so extroverted and blah, blah, blah. No, I have to be to do what I do.
Yeah.
I just talked to Seth Godin, the world famous author. Okay. And he was on our podcast. And he said there are two Seth Godins.
Hmm.
And that's what I said too. I thought, well, I kind of think there's one me and I'm kind of that person all the time. He said there's two of him. There is Seth Godin, the author, and then there is Seth Godin, the normal guy. He said the normal guy is out on a boat rowing in the Hudson River as much as he can, all by himself, looking at, nature and other things. He said the other guy is the author. And so when he writes something, he'll look at it later and go, okay, would Seth Godin, the author, write this? And if not, he throws it out. So
Yeah.
I find that interesting that you're shy.
I would say an
Question.
example of that is I'm pretty conservative in my day in, day out life. But
Mhm.
when I get on stage as a musician, I'm wearing pretty flamboyant shirts. And right now I'm wearing red and blue or pink and blue tennis shoes. And people would have no idea the way I'm moving on stage or actually even playing my saxophone out in the audience that I'm really uncomfortable when I don't have the horn in my mouth.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Now I'm going to turn to something that I think is great for the audience because in my book, I talk about Sweetwater, I talk about you. And one thing I focused on is the experience, the customer experience that's delivered. So I'm going to do a little background on it, and then I'm going to throw it at you and you go riff and jam on it. But here's what's interesting. You're in a world in the music industry where you've got on one extreme, you've got Amazon and you can buy anything and it's at a a reasonably good price and you can get it relatively quickly and you just get on. There you go. At the opposite end, you have the either local music shops or guitar centers or whatever that have been out there that are now fewer in number, and thanks part to you because your company's really done a great job there. So here's what's interesting in the music world. That's why I want to throw this to you right away. You have one extreme of digital and very impersonal. You have the other extreme of super personal, but there's a limited supply and there's some guy or woman there that you talk to. You have found a way to create an experience that is partially digital and very, very partially intimately personal. Can you describe what it is?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's many steps or many parts to this, but the real thing is having someone at Sweetwater that really knows the products and develops a relationship with the musician or whoever the end user is on the other end. We spend, as an example, 13 weeks before one of our people can ever talk to a customer. And during that 13 weeks, we're learning what we call the art of the perfect conversation, where we don't negotiate the price until the selling's done. We want to make sure it's the right product for the customer, whether it's inexpensive or expensive. Many times we'll tell a customer, you don't need to spend that much. You could spend less, but by the way, you also need the accessories to go with it. If you buy a slightly less keyboard or a guitar, you still would like to have a stand for it. You'd like to have the cables to plug it in, so on and so forth. And so we really are thinking about the customer relationship and making sure that it works long term. We're never looking at the one quick sale. We're fortunate to be in an industry where there's a lot of repeat business. And so everything we do is about the repeat business. But during that Sweetwater University, the 13 weeks, we're teaching the perfect conversation. We're reading various sales books, Stephen Covey's 7 Habits, that sort of thing. And we probably spend less time on the technology. Most of the people that come work for me already have a 4-year degree or a lot of experience, so they know most of the technology. We might have to brush them up on a few details, but it's really all about people. It's a people business. It's a relationship business. And that allows us to cross that divide from digital to analog. And a lot of people always ask, how can you do that customer service on the telephone? And we just do. We keep track of all kinds of things about the customer, a little bit Big Brother-ish, but we're keeping track of spouses' names and maybe children's names, birth dates. And I will tell you that each one of our sales engineers, we have about 650 of them today, they develop personal one-on-one relationships with their customers. Also, unlike other mail order places, if you happen to call in or we call you, and we do call you every month, every 3 months, every 6 months, at least twice a year, depending on your interests and your buying patterns. But we'll call you to touch base and just see how you're doing. And that if you would call in, you always get routed back to the same salesperson, assuming they're there and not on vacation and that sort of thing. If they're on vacation, of course, we'll take care of you. But we try and keep that relationship going. So it's really a one-on-one relationship. It gets to the point where the customers trust us. And that's why they buy from us. That's why we've been so successful. It's all about trust. It really is.
Well, here's one thing I want to go back to because this is interesting. You did not gloss over it, but I think you take it for granted, and that is the Sweetwater University approach. Because if you think about it, 99% of all companies hire a salesperson in this case and says, hey, like you said, hey, you've played in bands, you've been to college, you've been to conservatory. Hey, okay, get in there. Okay, we got a sale on this and that. Let's go. And you did exactly the opposite, where it's like, I'm not letting you into the room with another customer, and I mean that figuratively, on the phone, whatever, until you learn the Sweetwater approach, the Sweetwater way. You learn how to deal with humans, and yes, you understand the products. Can you dig into the Sweetwater University approach? Because I want to really emphasize this. That's not cheap to do. Everybody, think about this. You hire a group of people in, and you're investing for a minimum of, let's say, 6 to 12 weeks before they make a dime for your company. So, Chuck, can you explain a little more in depth about that?
Yeah, that's very true. And our Sweetwater University is 13 weeks. We have about 300 classes that are taught by 80 different teachers. Some are fellow employees, some are manufacturers, reps, a little bit of everything. But the real thing is, I believe everyone is either adding to the credibility or taking credibility away from our company. And we have worked so hard to protect our brand through the years and to grow our brand. We can't have an employee get on the phone and say something stupid and borrow our credibility. And so whether you're a receptionist or somebody doing janitorial work. We have various levels of that sort of training, and we empower all of our employees to always do the right thing. And but we cannot have someone on the phone borrowing credibility from everyone else. We talk about sometimes bring someone in and maybe their ethics aren't as strong as we thought they were when we interviewed them. They're not going to last very long.
Right.
The fellow sales engineers will chase them out. And also, frankly, people will feel inferior if they can't keep that integrity at a high level. So.
No, I think that's great. We're going to take a little break. We'll be back. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions that are a little more visionary when we get back. So everybody, this is Chuck Surack, Sweetwater CEO, founder, and philanthropist. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Difference Talks podcast. Difference Talks is brought to you by LeBeau Marketing Communications and Training. LeBeau focuses on one word: differentiation.
In fact, we wrote the book on it, called The Power of Differentiation. Our goal is to inspire 1 million people with this message, helping brands win hearts, minds, and market share.
Discover more at LeBeau.com.
All right, we are back with Chuck Surack. Now, a couple of things. I'm going to ask him personal questions and a professional question. But before we do that, our entire podcast recording studio was purchased from Chuck at Sweetwater Sound. And he didn't know that because he's dealing with far bigger purchases. But my team turned to his company. We worked with our sales engineer, and we've got cameras, we got microphones and everything. Hey, Chuck, do you recognize this microphone right here?
Absolutely. It's a beautiful microphone. Everyone aspires to own one of those.
That's right. So it's a Neumann U87AI, and it's 1970 vintage. Chuck, this thing is my favorite microphone in the world. But anyway,
I personally own a couple of those myself, and they're the mic to aspire to. That was probably the mic that the most famous engineer, Bruce Swedien, who did all of Michael Jackson's recordings, he used that mic on everybody, from Frank Sinatra to Michael Jackson, on and on and on. Pretty wild.
Well, enough of our technical talk here. So I'm going to ask you this question. Can you share a situation where you as a leader had to rally your people to overcome a challenge? And in doing that, you not only overcame the challenge, because that's what we always hear in business. Oh, he did this and everything's great. But you had to motivate and inspire your team.
Yeah, there have been multiple times through my career, but probably the two biggest ones that I can remember. Back in 2008, 9, 10, we were in a recession. And if you remember, General Motors had filed bankruptcy. I was on the board of directors of a local bank that was being publicly traded. And we were given a lot of direction as a bank to call in various business loans. And it was painful. I hated that we had to go to some of these customers that were still paying the loans on time, but they were in a category that the government said we were too much focused on and all that. And so it was a pretty rough time, and people were worried, again, with General Motors and several companies filing bankruptcy. And I came back very ceremoniously one day after one of those awful banking meetings, and I pulled the whole team together. We had about 225 employees at the time. And I brought them into our auditorium, into our theater, and I said, as arrogant as this sounds, I'm choosing to not participate in this recession. I don't want you looking over your shoulder for a new job. I've never laid anybody off. I'm not about to lay anybody off. We're going to focus on the basics. We're going to take care of the customers. And we did. And so for the next year, we took on some new lines that made sense. We started carrying drums as an example. We also dropped some manufacturers that were not easy to do business with or just didn't make sense. Probably the biggest thing we did is we hired lots of great employees that were being laid off from other companies. But all that ties into my philosophy that anything's possible and failure is not an option. And that to me was a very clear example of just really making sure our employees felt comfortable. And I'll tell you, fast forward from 2009, 10, when I did that to this day, there's still employees that will remind me of that day. And just, it gave them a level of confidence. And that was a big one for me. I will tell you the other one is the pandemic in 2020. We had just opened a brand new 600,000 square foot warehouse. It was full of inventory, and we were told we had to shut down. And it'd only be 2 weeks. Well, as you know, it ended up being much longer than 2 weeks. but I was panicked, and we had orders still coming in, but my wife, my daughter, myself, and many of the leadership of the company were in the warehouse packing boxes because we needed to get those orders to our customers. At that point, our employees couldn't come work, but the leadership could work. Eventually, our governor came around and said, no, mail order is important and mail order places can stay open. And that allowed us to fill essential items and all of that. And you might ask, what are our essential items? Well, we sold lots of video reproducing equipment, two-way, Zoom kind of products, all that sort of thing. We were selling products to hospitals, things that you wouldn't normally think would be in the music world, but video cameras and all that. And then eventually we started selling instruments. And that was an amazing period. Our business that year was up 40%. We were a large business already, but everybody wanted to stay home or had to stay home, and they were learning to play guitar and keyboards and that sort of thing. But it was a very trying few months. And I had to show by leadership that I would be willing to be in there at 5 a.m. And I stayed from 5 a.m. till 11, 12 o'clock at night packing boxes. I learned what it was like to get cuts on my fingers and all that sort of thing again. But that really inspired the employees to see me actually do the work too. So
Yeah, and we went through a similar thing with the pandemic where we brought everybody together because they were pretty panicked, and all of our friendly competitors were laying people off and shutting down. And we just said, look, we're going to not only stay open, we're not going to lay anyone off, we're not going to reduce salaries, we're not going to reduce the number of days you work, but we're going to make sure we're offering everything we can to our customers.
Yep.
So we'll work
Exactly.
from home, but we're not going to compromise whatsoever. And we grew 20% during the COVID pandemic as well. As our competitors really, they just took a different approach. They just kept their heads down and waited. Question for you now, if it's 3 years from now and you're really satisfied, I get you back on the podcast and I go, what's going on? You go, it's been the greatest 3 years. What's happened in those 3 years for you, your family, et cetera?
Well, you alluded to this earlier. 3 years ago, this month, actually, I sold the majority of Sweetwater. I still own a large portion, and I'm still chairman of the board and all that sort of stuff. And I get in there every week or two, but I don't have to be in there day in, day out. But when we sold the majority 3 years ago, which I never thought I would do, I literally loved what I did. I thought I would die at my desk, but it was just an incredible opportunity. And it allowed us to take a lot of money off the table, frankly, and start a big foundation. And so that's, I'm really excited about that right now. We're doing a whole bunch of things with the foundation. I've supported all kinds of projects in Fort Wayne, just trying to help those that maybe need a hand up. We're starting a music training school. It'll open up this fall, where I'm hoping to allow Fort Wayne Community School inner city kids have reduced or free music lessons. A few years ago, we gave a couple $1 million to put instruments in their hands. Now we're going to have a way to teach them how to play those instruments, in addition to what happens in the school system. I'm chairman of the Boys and Girls Club right now here in town. I raised all the money to build a new building for them. I built a new building for Bridge of Grace. And so I just love that I can use my experience and my influence to encourage others to support so many of the nonprofits that are going on in Fort Wayne. And in the meantime, I have 16 other businesses that I'm running. So that's keeping me pretty busy. I'm busier, way busier now than when I worked at Sweetwater. I don't even know how I would go back and work at Sweetwater at this point. But 3 years from now, I'd like to think that all of those are going really strong, and we've just been able to make this place a little bit better.
Yeah, Chuck, for those who don't know, and Chuck, you can pipe in here, it's pretty amazing. Chuck owns a group of businesses. It's the Sweet family of businesses that he owns. And it's everything from an optical location, a store that sells glasses, to a helicopter company, to a music theater, you might want to call it, a venue, and so many things in between. You're also doing development in our downtown area as well. You're encroaching into the Indianapolis area, I understand, as far as trying to support some things down there as well. So where does it all end as far as that, Chuck, or does it just keep going?
I think it keeps going. I don't believe you can stand still. You're either moving forward or you're moving backward. And I know I don't want to move backward. So things are growing, always getting better. Failure is not an option. That's how I look at things.
You're talking about helping others and all. What is your personal differentiation? What is it that you do or are that is distinct, in your opinion?
I don't know how I got the title, but I do have a little bit of influence and a little bit of leadership. I've been chairman of many of the boards that I've been on, and that seems to rally others around me. Especially, as I've raised money for various organizations. When Lisa and I put our own money in, it gives a seal of approval that allows others to step up and put their money in. I don't know how I got that title or got that influence, but somehow I guess it did. And so that I would say that's it. But I just love being involved and helping others. Some of the stuff that is so obvious to me, and maybe that goes all the way back to producing musicians, but things that are really obvious to me sometimes aren't so obvious to the other board members or even the leaders of the organizations. And just a simple, why don't we do this? Or how come we didn't look at that? And it's like, oh my gosh, I've turned on a light bulb for them. So.
So my final question is this, and we call it the best day question. So what is a best day for you? So you have a lot of different businesses going on. You're doing philanthropic work. You're trying to relax, other things. But what, Chuck, happens on the best day where you're either coming home or you're doing whatever and you're energized and you have more energy than you did when you woke up and you're going, this is what it's all about? What is your best day?
Oh man, I am so blessed. Every day is a best day for me. It could be flying my helicopter. I'm a helicopter pilot. I've flown all over the country to see this earth from 500 feet. You just can't imagine how spectacular it is. It's something you can't see in an airplane or a swamp boat. You can go to unbelievable places. Coming home and spending time with my wife and my daughter and two sons and our two little grandbaby daughters. That's a very special day. I love having a day where I'm really busy and I feel like I'm stressed at work, so I'm really tired, but I know I've accomplished a lot. And whether that's meeting with various nonprofits to, checking up on our businesses, all those are great days. Playing music, I love. I play music probably 8, 9, 10 times a month at various theaters and clubs. This summer, we're doing a tour of all the little towns and we do these concerts. That's a great day. So I'm just blessed. Every day is a great day. And I'm fortunate that I still have my health and friends. And boy, I couldn't pin it down to one thing.
No, I appreciate it. And I really appreciate the time today because what you've shared, and I think everybody that hears this will pick up on it. You have a great passion. You just purely don't think that there's a barrier out there that should stop you. So it's just like, okay, there's something there. We'll figure a way around it and we'll get whatever we think we need to do done. And
absolutely. Anything is possible.
Anything is possible. You said it about 5 times, and I agree with you, and you've shown it. So, Chuck, I want to thank you. You've been a really great friend to me. You're a great friend to our region here. And I have to say, I hope our audience enjoys this, listens to it, takes note, and also hears, and I think this is what's so important when you're really in touch with what makes you who you are, you're energized by it. You love what you're doing as opposed to sitting there being beaten down by it. And I think that's inspiring. So thank you for being here today with me. It's been a great honor and pleasure as a friend.
Thank you, Barry. And I would add, I respond to every email, every phone call. If anyone wants to reach out to me, it's Chuck at Surack, SURACK.com. And you can also go to our website, Surack, SURACK, enterprises.com. Barry, thank you. I've enjoyed being with you today.
Thank you. And Chuck means it. He will reach out. He'll talk with you. He will do it. And to me, I challenge anybody that heard this not to do it, because if you don't reach out and you have a thought, then what's the problem? He's going to talk to you. It can only be positive. So thank you very much. Thanks for being on Difference Talks. Until next time, leaders differentiate.
Thanks, Barry.
Thank you for listening to Difference Talks, produced by the amazing team at LaBeouf. All original music on this podcast was created by LaBeouf.
Buy our book, The Power of Differentiation, on Amazon. Have a question for the Difference Talks team? Email us at differencetalks@labeouf.com.